A new divine rose, a true heir to the Seven, more powerful than ever, and united Rivellon in its battle against the Void. All across the realm he was worshipped and adored. Humans, lizards, elves and dwarves all rallied to his banner. The Great Allegiance stood once more, but the war continued. From the depths of the Void, the God King still sought to return. As for me, my last hope of ever being freed of the God King's terrible tyranny faded when the God woke and claimed divinity. An eternity of pain and suffering is mine. I cling now to the dream that one day the veil will be sealed, that one day I can be freed, that one day a new God woken will rise.
So it ends. I am victorious. An end to tyranny.
And so it ended. A tale that began with my own ill-fated attempt to rid the world of the God-woken. When the dust settled, no new divine had risen. Instead, all Source was released into the world for all the people and every creature to share. Everyone was now a sorcerer. And united, the peoples of Rivellon pushed back the God King into the very depths of the Void. This ushered in a new golden age of peace and prosperity. But alas, it was not to last. With many greedy for wealth, power and position, the struggle soon began anew. Source, the very language of creation, was used in violence once more. The never-ending contest for power continued. As for me, my last hope of ever being freed of the God King's terrible tyranny faded when the God-woken failed to seal the veil. An eternity of pain and suffering is mine, in service of the King, until the day I am freed, the day the God King returns.
Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. A God-woken. But what good is it to be God-woken when Source is now a free-for-all, and there is no divinity to be had? Don't fool yourself. In the absence of a master will rise. As long as there is power, there is conflict. Source for all, it is but the dream of an idiot. In that sense, I suppose I should look upon it all as an opportunity. People crave authority. They'll beg for a sorcerer king like me. Please, I'm not a dilettante.
He sighs, which seems to ease his surly countenance.
But come, we've travelled too long by one another's side to end with an argument. We'll not part on bad terms, will we? Home. After all, I've dragons to raise. I need to teach them to be good boys and girls before they set the entire world on fire. There may be an accident or two along the way. Can't be helped, I'm afraid. I do so long to see my palace again. The Forbidden City. The scents of spices and incense. The sound of sitars in far-off rooms. To sit all day in perfumed shade and watch the white of the marble change with the journey of the sun. But above all, I long to be with Sadha. Long to finally have the time to love. Oh, but before you go, remember how when we first met, I took you by the jaw to inspect your teeth? Not something one forgets in a hurry. Now, if you recall, as per your own testimony, you've no culinary skills, you lack a sense of fashion, and you've little or no regard for personal hygiene. A damning assessment, if ever there was one. Still, I'm nothing if not a tolerant man who believes in individual growth. I'm sure the journey taught you much. As such, I'd like to offer you what I denied you before, the opportunity to become my slave. What say you? But where are you going? Really? It's the lack of manners that I find so unforgivably disgraceful. You had your chance. Now all your life you'll wonder, what if?
I have a lot of planning to do, now that there's not to be a new divinity.
She drums her fingers testily on her crossed arms.
All that work, all that effort, tossed into the gutter like a malformed child. Is it taking you this long to figure that out? Never mind. I'll find another way. I always do.
She fingers the mask covering her face. For a moment, it seems as though she's about to remove it. But instead, she places a hand on your shoulder.
We've come a long way together. I did my best by you all the way. Sacrificed much. And I'd have given even more to see you fulfill your destiny.
She looks you up and down.
I guess this will have to do. Take a moment, why don't you? Relax. Enjoy. I certainly plan to do the same. Oh, I don't know, around and about. Treat myself to some mead, a lover 300. I'd say we've earned it. Perhaps our paths will cross again. Perhaps not. Until we find out.
I've got to admit, I'm all about returning the power to the people, but I never could have seen this one coming.
He eyes you slyly, but consents to one final tale.
The beast of the sea rose triumphant, guiding his fellow Godwoken from an island prison to a final hurrah. He boarded the Lady Vengeance, now inexplicably whole due to magic a beast could never understand, and returned to his homeland. Then began the process of rebuilding, restoring trust, handing out hope, serving his people. Huh. Guess that one doesn't really end with a bang. But that's alright. You know, it's a work in progress. Hey, up there!
Source of all, eh? Bold move, I'll grant you that. I didn't think anyone considered the little people anymore. I don't know yet. Perhaps peace will reign and all will be equal. Or perhaps you've bestowed great power on undeserving children and turned them loose on each other. Time will tell, I'm sure. That is the question, isn't it? How does one top the greatest feat of necromancy ever conceived? I might have the answer to that. Tell me, have you ever heard of Gustafjan? No, of course you wouldn't. It's a written language, unreadable to most, but myself naturally. It comes from a mysterious race from another world, beings that feed on minds. I intend to seek them out. This Gustafjan seems to guard portals to their realm. Once I've uncovered one, well, why settle for being the greatest mind in just one world, when there's another for the taking?
The world was at peace, at least for now. With its significance as the seat of divinity diminished, Arx fell into decline, and within 7 generations had emptied. Few were as prepared for the new world as the lizardkin of the ancient empire. With power spread equally throughout the world, the advantage lay with those who knew how to steal it, and at this the lizards excelled. Justinia returned to her throne. Under her rule, the Dwarven kingdom prospered, until 2 years later a jealous lover stabbed her in the heart with a mutton fork. With their power returned, the elves reclaimed their lands from the Death Fog and began to rebuild. Soon they would split as two factions sought power, one to bring back the trees, the other to bring back the Scions. A dwarven joke did the rounds. It ends with the punchline, "So Lucian dropped the Death Fog on them again." And in a dark forest on the far side of a desert, well beyond the high seas, the Black Ring came together once more. The island of Fort Joy, the old redoubt of the Source King Brachus Rex, was turned over to the people of Driftwood to use as they wished. They turned it into a holiday resort. Reaper's Coast prospered. The fisheries returned, and the fertile farmlands produced the greatest harvests the surviving farmers had ever seen. Blood Moon Island became particularly fecund, its soil producing the greatest crops. A particularly crimson-fleshed orange grown on the island became a delicacy across half the world. The black pits took fire. The oil there burns still. Driftwood became a centre of industry, trade and transport. Lohar became mayor, and Brayton Barnes grew rich until, after a public argument over import duties, Barnes died in an accident, buried under several tons of fish, and also stabbed in the back with a gutting knife. After a long and harrowing journey, Lovric the Waiter arrived in Sicil, where he opened a tavern. The meaty stew became famed almost as much for its food as it was for its greasy, abusive owner. Lagan left his over-demanding wife and began a relationship with a local bard. In the spirit of loving generosity, he returned the ring to his now ex-wife. In a fit of rage, she threw it into the sea. You would never forget Dorothea's kiss. Dorothea herself left Driftwood for the ancient empire, ever in search of the perfect kiss. She never found it, although once or twice she came close. The nameless isle had vanished. Although only open water remained, by instinct ships would steer clear. None of the captains could articulate why. Millennia later, adventurers would come in search of the legendary divine city of Arx and the crypt of the great Lucian. None would pass the path of blood. Young Han went into the theatre and became one of the realm's most popular actors. With no new divine, Malady found herself in a predicament. She had an important problem to solve, but no ally strong enough to call upon, and so her search continued. Having performed the greatest act of necromancy in history, Tarquin found the new world unchallenging. He became obsessed with rumors of another plane of existence. One day he vanished, and was never seen again. With the source released to the world, Ahu the wizard spent more and more time as a cat. One day he decided he would not change back. Jehan the demon hunter found himself at a loose end, so he opened a museum of demonic artifacts. After it burned down, with Jehan inside, witnesses claimed that the flames were the color of blood. As the forests grew anew and the elves were equals at last, Sahala shared elven knowledge of Source with the world. But some elves disagreed and plotted against her. Chief amongst her opponents was Tova, Sahala's own mother. The Beast of the Sea returned to the Dwarven Kingdom, this time as a lawmaker. After a very public blunder, Marcus eschewed political power and returned to the sea. The Beast and the Lady Vengeance sail on. The Red Prince came home a hero. With Sada, he had more dragons. Soon, Prince became Emperor, one who would not use his dragons for conquest. His realm knew peace, and the world did not burn. And then there was you. You returned to the world a sorcerer among many. Your future was yours to decide. Did you accept your new status with humility? Only you know the truth, you and one other. But of him you are free. The God King no longer calls your name. He no longer whispers your shame. Only you know if you atone for your sins.
Dallas the Hammer, the secret eternal, purged the Godwoken and used the Source to close the veil to the void. The world was saved. Statues in memory of the Godwoken who sacrificed their Source were erected all across Rivellon. They would never be forgotten. The half-demon Malady took pity on the soulless, God-woken silent monks and brought them to the Hall of Echoes. There, from the scraps of their souls that remained, she restored them to life. Sorcerers no more, they lived out the rest of their lives, freed of the burden of being the God-woken, freed from the weight of the world. As for me, the God-woken sacrifice severed the link that bound the Sworn to the God King, and I was finally free. To atone for my sins, I spent the rest of my days taking care of the sick and elderly, telling the story of the Godwoken, that the world may never forget the greatest heroes Rivellon had ever seen.
Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. A silent monk. At least that's what you'd be if it weren't for Malady. Like I would about the return of the codpiece, that it's highly unfashionable. The man's a man, all too prone to the weaknesses of the heart. We've seen the results of his errors firsthand. I give it a week before he errs anew.
He laughs boisterously.
Of course, I could give it the distinction of class. Yes, well, that's to say, that's love, not... All right, you made a point. Besides, Lucian, Perhaps even a god deserves a second chance, even if he is a god without powers. As for myself, I'm counting on a second chance as well. Why, I mean my empire, of course. I intend to go home as soon as I can. After all, I've dragons to raise. Still, I'm nothing if not a tolerant man. What say you? Well, that's settled then. You're very welcome to my house indeed. We'll feast and reminisce. But in the meantime, my boots are not going to clean themselves. You'll have to wear a collar again, by the by. Nothing you're not used to.
Ah, there you are. More than a silent monstrosity, less than a god. In the end, I'm not totally convinced it was worth my while to restore your consciousness, seeing what you've done with it so far. Where did I go wrong? How is so boring. It's the why that surprises me. Unfortunately for me, I've grown rather fond of you. Still, I'd expected quite a bit more from you. I was interested in being owed a favor by a shiny new god, not some emperor of the realm. Never mind. I'll find another way. I always do.
She fingers the mask covering her face. For a moment, it seems
We've come a long way together. I did my best by you all the way.
she looks you up and down.
I guess this will have to do. Take a moment, why don't you? Relax. Enjoy. I said it.
I always thought that those who resorted to self-sacrifice were lacking in imagination. I must admit, that was rather noble of you. A world without source is one that will need individuals of wit and intellect. A sharp mind is the only magic now. I believe I shall enjoy this new world. That is the question, isn't it? No, I intend.
At last, the world was at peace. As the races united behind Lucian, Arx remained the center of power. The ancient Lizard Empire opened its gates. The houses disbanded, and the Empire adopted a pluralist quasi-democracy. Anyone could vote for whoever they pleased, as long as the House of Shadows approved. Justinia returns to her throne. Under her rule, the Dwarven kingdom prospered, until 2 years later, a jealous lover stabbed her in the heart with a mutton fork. Lucian made amends to the elves. He gave them lands and vast riches from the coffers of the old divine order. But the elves never forgave him. They would not trust humans again. And in a dark forest on the far side of a desert, well beyond the high seas, the Black Ring came together once more. The island of Fort Joy, the old redoubt of the Source King Brachus Rex, was turned over to the people of Driftwood to use as they wished. They turned it into a holiday resort. Reaper's Coast prospered. The fisheries returned, and the fertile farmlands produced the greatest harvests the surviving farmers had ever seen. Blood Moon Island became particularly fecund, its soil producing the greatest crops. A particularly crimson-fleshed orange grown on the island became a delicacy across half the world. The black pits took fire. The oil there burns still. Driftwood became a center of industry, trade, and transport. Lohar became mayor, and Brayton Barnes grew rich until, after a public argument over import duties, Barnes died in an accident, buried under several tons of fish, and also stabbed in the back with a gutting knife. After a long and harrowing journey, Lovric the waiter arrived in Sicile, where he opened a tavern. The meaty stew became famed almost as much for its food as it was for its greasy, abusive owner. Lagan left his over-demanding wife and began a relationship with a local bard. In the spirit of loving generosity, he returned the ring to his now ex-wife. In a fit of rage, she threw it into the sea. You would never forget Dorothea's kiss. Dorothea herself left Driftwood for the ancient empire, ever in search of the perfect kiss. She never found it, although once or twice she came close. The nameless isle had vanished. Although only open water remained, by instinct ships would steer clear. None of the captains could articulate why. Arx became a great metropolis, famed for its prosperity, its culture, its diversity, and the willingness of its denizens to stab each other in the back for the slightest advantage. Young Han went into the theatre and became one of the realm's most popular actors. With no new divine, Malady found herself in a predicament. She had an important problem to solve, but no ally strong enough to call upon, and so her search continued. Having performed the greatest act of necromancy in history, Tarquin found the new world unchallenging. He became obsessed with rumors of another plane of existence. One day he vanished and was never seen again. Ahu the wizard became one of Lucian's most trusted advisors once more. He always knew that something had changed in the divine. He never discovered what that was, or if he did, he never said a word. Jehan the demon hunter found himself at a loose end, so he opened a museum of demonic artifacts. He made a fortune. With Lucian in power, Sahala took the elves away from the world. They grew strong once more amidst the trees of the regrown home forest. Some say her plans for revenge will bring about the end of days. Some say only Tova, her mother, holds her back. Lucian returned as divine, united the races, and became Lord Emperor of all Rivellon. Only Dallis knew that he was entirely powerless. Dallis and you. The Eternal, now known as Dallis, was a secret advisor to Lucian and to his successors. For eons she would walk in the world, and would outlive the peoples and all, and wander alone amongst the dying stars. The Beast of the Sea returned to the Dwarven Kingdom, not as a rebel, but as a lawmaker. Merciful and wise, he led the dwarves into an age of prosperity. His grave looks out over the sea. The Red Prince came home a hero. With Sada, he had more dragons. Soon, Prince became Emperor, one who would not use his dragons for conquest. His realm knew peace, and the world did not burn. And then there was you. In a world of peace, you could live forever. Your future was yours to decide. But you were a sorcerer no more. Did you accept your new status with gratitude, or did you rebel? Only you know the truth, you and one other. But of him you are free. The God King no longer calls your name. He no longer whispers your shame. Only you know if you atone for your sins.
The Eternals returned to the world. In the eyes of the God King, Fane was redeemed. He returned to his studies. Dwarves, elves, lizards, and humans all became slaves, ruled over by the Sworn and the Eternals. The God King had defeated the Seven and returned from the void. Relics of the old world remained, but in time they crumbled and fell, like the memories of the peoples who had built them, lost to time like sand in the wind, but not lost to Fane. Fane would never forget. This I know, because Fane is now my master. My task? To chronicle the rise and fall of the Godwoken. This was their story. Master, I hope you approve.
Don't you dare look me in the eyes, slave, for that is all you are now that you bow to the God King. The world as we know it will soon come to an end, and welcome an undead wasteland in its stead. Emperor of the dead, to sit on a cold grey throne amid a vast necropolis. Never. Your battle may have ended, mine continues.
It isn't going to be easy cleaning up this mess you've made. I don't know how I could have been so wrong about you. I'm never wrong.
A cruel smile spreads across her lips.
Tell your God King he'll have to send much more than you to silence me. Until we meet again, all the best to you.
You err here, your cupboard can't...
He pauses, then... And what of you? What of you, Fane the Eternal, indeed? You were the key to it all. You brought the Eternals back to the world and saw the God King enslave the thieves. You set right the original wrong. And the Seven were punished for their transgression. Are you proud of all you achieved? Or are you ashamed of your sins?